Hi, I'm Bryce.
And I'm Gemma.
And today we're going to talk about
feedback mechanisms. To begin, let's define homeostasis. Homeostasis is the property of a system that regulates its internal environment and tends to maintain a stable, relatively constant condition of properties, such as temperature or pH. It can be in either an open or closed system. In simple terms, it is a process in which the body's internal environment is kept stable. The goal of homeostasis is to maintain the target set point. For example, in humans, a target set point is to stay at 37 degrees Celsius. In a negative feedback loop, you go above and below the set point but try to stabilize. An example of this would be temperature changes. A negative feedback loop occurs when conditions in the body change from a set point. This change will be detected from the hypothalamus. This will lead to corrective mechanisms being activated. From there, conditions will return to the set point and the corrective mechanisms will be switched off. In a positive feedback loop, you move away from the target set point and amplify the conditions. An example is fruit ripening. Positive feedback loops enhance or amplify changes. This tends to move a system away from its equilibrium state and make it more unstable. And if something goes wrong in the feedback loop, there may be an alteration, an example being diabetes.
If you are an ectotherm, you let your environment affect your internal regulatory mechanisms. For example, a paramecium, or a lizard that lives in a pond, has the same internal temperature as the external temperature of the water. As we move out of the pond and become more sophisticated, animals are able to maintain homeostasis within their body. For example, a cat maintains its temperature, blood glucose levels, and the osmolarity of its blood all through feedback loops. These properties make the cat an endotherm. This brings up one of the most common misconceptions among biology students. Animals are not warm or cold-blooded, but instead endo or ectotherms.
In humans, we use a negative feedback loop to maintain our normal temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. However, if a child has a fever, the increase in temperature is sensed at the roof of the mouth, an extension of the brain's hypothalamus. The first thing your body does when it senses the change is it starts to sweat. As the water molecules evaporate, it's going to create evaporative cooling, which carries heat with it. The child will also start to vasodilate, so the blood will be carried to the surface of the skin, so through convection they will start to lose more heat. But now they may be too cold, so to get warmer they will get goosebumps, which stands hair up and pulls the skin in tighter. It will also vasoconstrict to have less convection, and the body temperature will increase to reach the target set point. The stabilization of the body temperature makes this a negative feedback loop. So throughout the whole day, your body is regulating your body temperature, and it's doing it through a negative feedback loop to try and maintain the target set point.
What happens if we want to go in the opposite direction? In a positive feedback loop, amplification takes place. An example of amplification is the ripening of an apple. A ripe apple produces a gas called ethylene, or C2H4. Here we have fruit on a tree, but we want to make all of the fruit become ripe. The tree will get its fruit to become ripe through the communication of the chemical ethylene. The ethylene will be given off as a gas by one of the ripe apples and picked up in the neighboring apples, and then it will cause all of those apples to ripen as well. So if you put one overripe apple in a bowl of unripened apples, the other apples will also become ripe. Those newly ripened apples will also create more ethylene and spread it to even more apples, until all of the fruit has become ripened. This is an example of a positive feedback loop, or amplification.
One of the best examples of positive feedback is during childbirth. The pressure of the baby's head causes stretching of the uterus, which stimulates uterine contractions. This causes further stretching, heightening the contractions, and so the cycle continues until the fetus is expelled from the uterus. A great example of a feedback mechanism in humans would be blood glucose levels, or the amount of glucose circulating in the blood. We use two different hormones, insulin and glucagon, to maintain blood glucose levels. The pancreas regulates blood glucose levels through the beta and alpha cells. If there's a lot of glucose outside the cells, more insulin is triggered to be released. So what that means is when the blood glucose level is high, insulin is going to be secreted from the pancreas and circulated throughout the body, which triggers other body cells to take in the glucose, as well as tell the liver to store that as glycogen. So when the blood glucose level is too high, insulin is secreted. What happens when your blood glucose goes down? Well, then your body will quit producing the insulin and will produce glucagon instead by the alpha cells in the pancreas. If someone has type 1 diabetes, their beta cells are destroyed, so the insulin cannot be produced. When the blood glucose levels go up, there's no way to get them back down. This has very bad effects on the body due to mistake in a feedback loop.
Now we will take you through the molecular mechanism whereby insulin triggers the uptake of glucose from your bloodstream.
Soon after a meal, the digestive system begins to break down the food you've eaten. The carbohydrates from this food will be broken down into a simple sugar called glucose. As this glucose is absorbed by your digestive system into your bloodstream, your blood sugar levels increase.
Your circulatory system then carries the glucose to muscle cells throughout the body where it is used to generate energy. And here's the important part. In order to get that glucose, which is now in your bloodstream, into your muscle cells, you need to have insulin present to trigger that uptake of events. Insulin is a small protein hormone produced by your pancreas. As the concentration of glucose in your bloodstream rises, your pancreas senses this increase and is stimulated to release insulin into your bloodstream. The produced insulin plays a key role in regulating the concentration of glucose in your blood, a process known as glucose homeostasis. The insulin that is now released into your bloodstream binds to the extracellular domain of receptor proteins found on the surface of liver and muscle cells. This binding triggers the autophosphorylation of the intracellular domain, which in turn phosphorylates a specific substrate signaling protein. This protein then phosphorylates other downhill signaling proteins, leading to an amplification at each step. This overall signaling process is known as a signal transduction cascade. One important consequence of this signaling cascade is the movement of glucose transport proteins called GLUTs toward the cell surface. As these storage vesicles fuse with the cell membrane, the number of GLUTs present on the surface of the cells increase, allowing the glucose to enter the cell. As a result, the glucose concentration in the bloodstream decreases. The glucose is now inside the cell where it can be metabolized to generate the energy in the form of ATP that is needed in all of your cells.
As previously explained, this process demonstrates both negative and positive feedback loops. Because of the increase in glucose, insulin is released by the pancreas, thus exemplifying a negative feedback loop. And the amplification of the signal transduction cascade represents a positive feedback loop, overall showing the daily importance of maintaining homeostasis. And we hope that helps!